Hello, I'm Ellen. Welcome to day 4 of Vlog Every Day in April. Today's topic is the Clair senses. If you watched the first 2 videos, you heard a lot about the Clair senses in conjunction with those first 2 topics. Today we're just going to talk about the Clair senses themselves, and I'm not clear yet how much detail we'll get into. We'll find out as we go along here, okay? So, what are the Clair senses? The Clair senses are our intuitive senses. They are Clairalience, which is clear smelling, Clairaudience, which is clear hearing, Claircognizance, which is clear knowing, Clairgustance, which is clear tasting, Clairsentience, which is clear feeling, and Clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. Those are our 6 intuitive senses. So, what are these senses? They are energetic, and sure, call them spiritual or call them psychic if you want, reflections of our physical senses. So the biggest thing I want to point out here is that they're called Clair senses or clear senses. The reason for that is because they come through without any ego attachment. They come through without any of our human perceptions muddying them up. So what I mean by that is taking Clairalience for example, not one of the most well-known ones, but even so, clear smelling. So let's say that you're sitting somewhere, you're by yourself, you're aware of the scents around you. Let's say that you might be smelling coffee from your mug or tea or something like that. And then all of a sudden, you're smelling a perfume. There's no other human around you. You're the only one there. You aren't wearing perfume. Your clothes aren't smelling like whatever detergent you've used. There's no physical or human explanation for what you're smelling, and yet there it is. And it turns out that that perfume is actually a method that's being used by a loved one in spirit to get your attention. So, sure, we can get into trying to debunk that smell, but let's suppose we go through that whole analytical and definitely in part egoic practice, and there's no other explanation for it. So then we come to accepting that it's something unusual, and then we get into identifying who it was that wore that perfume. Who do you associate that with? And that's, yes, one example, and that is, I would say, I just heard it's a more graphic example of it, because that smell is something we're actually experiencing externally, almost as though someone has brought a bottle of perfume and, wafted it under our nose for us to smell. More often than not, at least in my experience, Clairalience is very internal. So although I may all of a sudden be smelling, I'll take cinnamon as an example, reaching back to my day one video, it isn't because it's anywhere around me, and it isn't because a spirit is using it to get my attention. Instead, it's coming through in a purely energetic form. It is internal in the sense that even though it is coordinating itself with my physical sense of smell, no one else around me would be able to smell it, unlike with the perfume. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to give you another example to help you out. One of my spirit guides, whose name is Jasper, for whatever reason, when he shows up, it all of a sudden is as though the space around me is full of cigarette smoke. That's how it smells to me. And it makes me laugh now. When it first started happening, I wasn't pleased. And most of the time, I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, no one else smells it. The one time that someone did smell it was when I was in the hospital 5 years ago, and one of my ICU nurses stopped just outside the door of my room and said, "Who is smoking?" Of course, first of all, there was nobody in the room with me. There was no one else in the hallway. She was the only one that was doing the rounds at that point in time. And for whatever reason, she happened to pick up on Jasper's signature scent. But other people have been around me when he has shown up, and they have not smelled that. They have not picked up on it. So I want to say that it can be in some ways similar with all the clear senses. Perhaps the only one that I couldn't tie that together is with Clairgustance, clear tasting, because unless someone else eats something that we've taken into our mouths, they're not going to be tasting the same thing that we are, right? With Clairgustance, the action is, again, it's internal, and yet what's fascinating is that it can result in physical symptoms. So let's say that I'm made to taste oranges. And you know how when we have citrus, lemon or orange, our mouth starts to water? Like, my mouth will start to water. And the same thing when it comes to something like hot peppers. Now, here's a pretty cool example. It surprised the heck out of me. I love the show Chopped on Food Network. There was a type of pepper introduced to the contestants that I had never heard of before. And I immediately wondered how hot it was. And all of a sudden, I was tasting a pepper in my mouth. And I was able to interpret that because of the way my tongue was reacting and the rest of my mouth was reacting to that taste. I got a sense of its heat, which I wish I could remember what type of pepper it was. I don't. But its heat factor was a little bit more than, let's say, a jalapeno. And then one of the judges actually described its heat factor, and the way he described it matched my interpretation. So that was pretty cool. But that's another example of Clairgustance. And I found it really interesting that my guides did that with me, because it wasn't for someone else. It wasn't for any purpose other than my curiosity, and yet they provided me with that information. So let's skip back to then Clairaudience. I was trying to go in alphabetical order, but clearly we aren't really here. So Clairaudience, which is clear hearing. So First, I want to talk about the external factors of clairaudience. So I see that very much too like clairalience. Let's say that you are a person who hears disembodied voices. So voices of spirits, whether they are an active spirit or whether it's a sort of recording that just replays itself, which happens in some spaces. Some people will hear it and others may not hear it, just like it happened with my ICU nurse. Okay, and I would say that the external clairaudience is probably a lot less common than the internal clairaudience. I oftentimes say, I just heard whatever I just heard, and it's always between my ears. The only thing that I hear externally that I'm used to and other people don't seem to pay any attention to it are the sounds that energies make when they're either entering or exiting the space I'm in. And like I said, that doesn't bother me. I think it would really bother me to hear a disembodied voice. And that's probably why I don't hear them. I think my spirit guides know me well enough to know that that might freak me out. So most of the hearing that I do from a clairaudient standpoint is internal, between my ears. And it might be a song, it might be a train whistle. It oftentimes is words, phrases. And sometimes I can tell if they come from, let's say, a female energy or a male energy. Most often, though, it's simply neutral because it doesn't matter whether or not it's coming from a male or a female energy. And clairaudience is a great way to get information to relay to clients or even for ourselves in a way that's unobtrusive. So let's say that we're in a situation that we want to get more information about, and it isn't something that we can ask other people for. So we start an internal dialogue with our spirit guides, asking for more information. And it's through clairaudience that we can get the information that we need so we can make a more informed decision about what we're doing in that space or with the people that are around us. Okay, I hope this makes sense. This is definitely a primer, a very basic primer. So then, claircognizance, clear knowing. That's when we literally just suddenly know something that there's no reasonable way we can know. Whether it's suddenly knowing that someone's going to call us, suddenly knowing that someone that we know and love is in trouble or perhaps is joyful. Perhaps suddenly we know that someone is pregnant. These kinds of things are claircognizance, clear knowing. Now, I did a survey a couple of weeks ago with my mailing list, and claircognizance was at the top of the intuitive senses people wanted to know more about. And my spirit guides made it clear to me why that is. Because there is a very powerful feeling around just being able to know something, just being able to have information suddenly available to us. you might say that it positions us in a way that puts us more in charge, makes us more masterful. And that, my dears, is pure ego. If you want claircognizance to be your main intuitive sense, it's really necessary to check in with yourself why that is. Because my guides just use the word manipulative. And unfortunately, yes, for some people who are really strong with their claircognizance, it could put them in a position of being able to manipulate people, manipulate situations. And there is nothing okay about that. So if the thought of claircognizance puts you on a power trip, take a step back and have a really good discussion with yourself about why that is and what you hope to accomplish. My experience is that it comes out of the blue, and there's really no rhyme or reason for it, not that I've discovered. Can it be useful walking into a space and suddenly just knowing you really shouldn't be there? Absolutely. However, that is serving our safety. That isn't something that would naturally, I believe, be thought of as, then what can I use this information for? What can I do with this information to make myself look better or to somehow put you in a position of power? Purely for safety reasons. And as far as suddenly knowing that someone is pregnant, which has happened to me on several occasions, when there's nothing physical to display that, it is just this sudden knowing that comes that this person is pregnant. And I honestly don't know why that is. I don't know why that would be important. So I'm wondering if my guides could answer that. We notice that in those cases where we have shown Ellen that there is a pregnancy, it is because the woman is in need of an advocate or a comrade. All right, well, that's really interesting. And so looking back at the several times that's happened, I'll be honest and say that when the knowing came in, I actually blurted it out to the person. I'm grateful now, in retrospect, that no one else was around at the time, or that no one overheard my uncensored blurting out of, "You're pregnant." Because confidentiality speaking, yuck, that's really uncomfortable to consider. I might have outed them without their permission. And so following my blurting out when I had just suddenly had this knowing around, then a conversation ensued, and typically a supportive conversation. And also a promise that I would not break any confidence. I would not let anyone else know what I knew. Not my story to tell. Okay? So I hope that makes sense too. Okay, my guides are showing me a lottery ticket. And maybe that's part of this egoic thing too around claircognizance, is that wonder if I just suddenly knew what the Powerball numbers were going to be. How amazing would that be? And honestly, okay, I'm going to let my guides take over. We notice that in instances like this is about the ego wanting more. This is about questioning abundance. This is about having an idea that you can obtain what is seemingly unattainable without any effort. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's pure ego. It really is. Anything else to say about claircognizance? No. Okay. So we've addressed clairalience, clairaudience, claircognizance, and Clairgustance a little bit. I referred to it from Clairalience. The one thing I'm going to add to Clairgustance, clear tasting, is how truly helpful it can be, whether on your own behalf or on behalf of someone who may be a client or a family member or a friend, a colleague. Yeah, I guess it could be helpful for strangers if you can cross that threshold of, this person doesn't know me, I don't know them, I suddenly have this information, and how do I give them this information without overstepping boundaries? Easier with clients, friends, family members, perhaps with colleagues, depending on our relationship with them. Clairgustance, when that comes up for me, it's because there is a need. And the need is usually that someone is undernourished in some way. If I'm talking to a client and I suddenly feel as though I have taken a big spoonful of oatmeal, chances are the client needs more whole grains in their life. Or maybe it is specifically oatmeal that they need. Oatmeal is good for the heart, right? And sometimes it's a mouthful of water, and the obvious there is the person just needs to drink more water. If it's an orange, it could be that, yes, it could be specifically that the person needs to just eat more fruit, and oranges in particular. And then why would that be? Perhaps they're deficient in vitamin C. The things that come up are always related to things that the client, the friend, the family member, the colleague are actually in need of. And oftentimes they'll say, yeah, I know. But that's another way for their spirit team to say, look, this is what we're noticing. Here's your opportunity to fix this. Okay? Anything else about Clairgustance? No. So now we're on to Clairsentience. And Clairsentience is clear feeling. What are feelings? Feelings can either be emotions or they can be the sensation of touch. So Clairsentience is definitely the wheelhouse of empaths, I would say. So if you're an empath, if you're a person who's very empathic, then you are likely a person who really feels the impact of trauma around you. It may be that you watch the news and you see some horrific event that's taken place and you feel the emotional impact of it as though you're there. That's clairsentience. On the physical side of things, clairsentience can be conducting a remote energy clearing and landing in a space where suddenly you can tell that the floor surface is no longer hard under your feet. Like right now, the surface under my feet is hard. All of a sudden, it feels like I'm standing in dirt. That's clairsentience. That's letting me know that the surface under my feet is, in fact, dirt, or at least something soft and loose. It is not the hard floor that my physical feet are set upon as I'm conducting this remote clearing. Clairsentience in that way can also be textures. It can be what a wall texture is, what a furniture texture is, that kind of thing. So why would clairsentience be helpful? It's certainly helpful from the feeling aspect. Let's say that you're meeting with a friend and everything seems to be fine except that you are feeling inexplicably sad or inexplicably angry or stressed out. And so it might be that you ask your friend some leading questions to find out what's going on, because chances are you're picking up on emotions they aren't expressing and yet need to express. So the opportunity exists to help them get out what they need to get out so that they can find some release and relief. And as far as it being a barometer, like for a world event or something like that, you could say it's helpful to know where things are at. I would say its help is limited because it can be so incredibly overwhelming, and that isn't helpful. So that's where we need to be really careful about putting boundaries up. And it may mean not watching the news. It may mean reading headlines or having a surface awareness so that you're not tapping into a depth of emotion that could actually be crippling for you at that clairsentient level, at that empath level. Okay? So let me see if there's anything else to say about clairsentience. Yeah, we noticed that with Ellen, this is one of her primary intuitive senses, and we use it that she may offer the service of expressing what is unexpressed. Yeah, and I see that as going back to that sitting with a friend and feeling emotions that just aren't forward in their presentation. That can certainly happen with clients. They might be talking about something and it seems on the surface from what they're saying to be one way, and yet the feelings that I'm getting with what they're talking about are something else entirely. And I will say, this is what I'm feeling. What does this mean? And that deepens the conversation. That gets to the root of what's happening. So yes, it can be an extremely useful tool. Anything else? No. All right. So our last one is clairvoyance, clear seeing. Also one of my strongest, if not my strongest, intuitive sense. So clear seeing is seeing with our third eye, our soul eye. And for me, that can mean anything from seeing pictures in my head, diagrams in my head, sometimes videos, slideshows, line drawings, whatever is helpful from a visual standpoint. Yes, my guides just showed me a billboard. Yeah, I sometimes see billboards with words on them. And what I really appreciate about clairvoyance is the fact that it shows me a clear vision of what's going on, and or it can corroborate what I'm feeling or otherwise sensing. When it comes up with a client, it can just be an additional level of validation for them or for me about the information that I'm receiving overall. So clairvoyance can extend outwardly too. So it could be, again, a situation where, let's say you're seeing an aura or energy around someone, and yet no one else is because of your clairvoyant tendencies. It may also be that your clairvoyance allows you to actually see the energy of a spirit or an entity or something of that nature in a more external rather than internal way. And I will say again for myself, my guides temper the external for me because I don't know. I do see shadow figures now and again. I do see light figures too. And yet, if I were to walk into a house and see a very obviously transparent person, which would be, a ghost, a spirit, standing there looking at me, I'm honestly not sure how I would respond. My knee-jerk reaction is that I would be pretty freaked out. And that's definitely coming from past responses, past fears. My guides are showing me I probably wouldn't freak out. In fact, I may be at a point where I would be way more curious and I would want to know, could I communicate? So I'm actually really grateful for that. However, that said, I can't even imagine what it would be like to, let's say, walk into my bedroom at night and see an obvious figure that way. I think I would find that really disturbing or disruptive and perhaps just fearful or fearsome to a point that it would be detrimental for me. It just wouldn't be in my best interest, let's say. So that's an overview of clairvoyance. And the last thing I'm going to say here is that all of us have the capacity to access these intuitive senses. We are all born with all of these intuitive senses. Some we will be more adept at than others. And it's simply a matter of paying attention to your physical senses. What are your strong suits with your physical senses? Are you a very visual person? Are you a very audio person? Are you a person who's extremely tactile? Like, it's really important to you to know what fabrics feel like, textures feel like. I'm that way too, by the way, very much so. I'm not good at museums because I want to touch everything. Oops. So, understanding or knowing yourself well enough to know what your stronger physical senses are will help you to understand what most likely your strongest intuitive senses will be. And not to say you can't develop those other things, not to say even from a physical standpoint that you can't develop your other senses more. Chefs do that. They develop their sense of smell and sense of taste and sense of feeling more to help them in the kitchen. And it can be the same way with us. Totally up to us what we feel will be useful and how we will be serving with them. Serving ourselves and serving others. Okay? I hope this has been helpful. Like I said, it's a primer, it's very basic, and I hope this overview gets you thinking about your own senses, physical and intuitive, and I hope that you will start working with them. That's your mission, should you choose to accept it. All right? So until tomorrow, take really good care. Lots of love.